Shalom. Call halal, Yahweh Bashem Hawashai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders. Salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so now more so than ever. To the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, it be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners, and to the Akwath that are listening and learning to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you with another lesson in truth. And this is a video called U.S. is among the worst countries for racial inequalities. And it is not among, it is the worst. Hands down, no argument. And I'm just going to, out the gate, correct a few things that you're going to hear for those of you who might be new. First of all, there's no such thing as white people. That is a social, nor is there anything such thing as black people. All right. You can see black and white in the Weon sign. The screen is white and the frame of it is black. No one's skin color are those colors. Those are social constructs which were made up. They were also made up to avoid the true nationality of the so-called white man, who is Esau, Edom, the only people in the Bible that's promised no mercy. All right. So they've been trying to hide who they are. Now that that's out the way, couple scriptures that I'm going to read because I want to let her just speak uninterrupted because normally I like to stop and do a commentary, but she goes in and points out, and that's a lot that she leaves out. I mean, I could add way more, but she does a great job. This is Zechariah 11:5, and it reads, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. So they slay our people all the day long and then hold themselves not guilty, man. And then they don't like it when a light is shined on them, like this critical race theory application. And it's not theory, it's facts of the institutionalized racism that America was built upon and exists within its educational system, which exists within its law system, which exists within its court system, which exists within its banking system, which exists within its employment system. Every system and every portion of America is racist, all right, according to their definition of racist. And what they don't like is that because of the modern age, this internet, which they created to be lucrative, what they don't understand that's a prophecy and that's written in Psalms the 19th chapter, that they're being exposed through this internet. All right, this is Habakkuk 2:16, and it reads, "Thou art filled with shameful glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of Yahweh's right hand shall turn unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be upon thy glory." So now Old Glory is being shamed of how it came to be and what it did to be, and then how it treated its citizens, especially the people of color, mainly the Israelites here in America, so-called Negroes, Latinos, because he's going to speak about the corruption in the banking system and that whole sort of thing, which proves once again that they were oppressed together. This is Jeremiah 50:33, and it reads, "Thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go." And yes, we are still captives of Basra. All right. That's why when the Lord comes back, Isaiah 63, he's coming to visit Basra. That will be the so-called white people. Okay. And like I said, they're being exposed on a grand level. This is Isaiah 42:22, and it reads, "But this is a people robbed and spoiled. They are all of them snared in holes, and they are hid in prison houses. They are for a prey, and none delivereth for a spoil, and none saith restore." All right. Who among you will give ear to this? who will hearken to hear the time to come. And the time to come is payback, recompense. Because see, the Bible says you have to pay back for everything that you do. And I always say that, you know, these Edomites, the so-called white man, he didn't read the fine print. All right, because Galatians 6 and 7 clearly says that, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For so wherever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So all that they've done is going to come back upon them double, as according to Revelation 18:6. One last scripture, and then we're going to let her commence to rip into the falseness and the wickedness of the so-called white man, especially those here in America. This is Revelation 13 and 9. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So the saints, which are the Israelites, are patiently waiting to take into slavery those that enslaved them, to kill those who kill them all the day long with the sword, all right, to recompense them, to pay them back. And that is where we're headed. So without any further ado,
some headlines. The US has asked India to engage minorities on CAA and FCRA. The US is introducing a bill to probe whether Myanmar's attacks on Rohingyas constitute genocide. The US says Pakistan's attacks on minorities are hampering religious freedom. The US criticizes Turkey for restricting the rights of minority groups. The US calls out Beijing for suppressing Christians, Uyghur Muslims, and Tibetan Buddhists. The US tags Russia as a country of particular concern. There are also Vietnam, Eritrea, Iran, Nigeria, North Korea, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, all countries of particular concern. And this happens every year. A quasi-judicial body called the USCIRF, or the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, publishes an unwarranted report, binds it with a claim of independently assessing and unflinchingly confronting threats to fundamental rights. It lampoons countries, schools them on equality, and speaks not a word on fundamental rights in America. What about the plight of minorities in the US? What about the rampant racism? Again, a stoic silence, which only goes on to indicate two possibilities. Number one, America thinks it is above all. Number two, the American truth is too bitter to confront. The crisis runs too deep for those sitting in America to dig it up annually. US President Joe Biden was recently asked his views on racism. He said, and I'm quoting, "I do not think America is racist, but I think the overhang from all the Jim Crow and before that slavery have had a cost." His deputy said the same. America's first black vice president, Kamala Harris, said this, "I don't think America is a racist country, but we also do have to speak the truth about the history of racism in our country and its existence today." Now, first of all, these statements contradict themselves. Why say something so assertively only to follow it up with a but? As for the truth, here it is. America has one of the worst records in the world on minorities. No matter what its leadership tells you, the country is systematically racist, and we will show you that on this episode of Gravitas Plus. Hello and welcome. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay, and tonight I argue that racism in America is a reality. Let's begin with history. Between 1525 and 1866, 12.5 million people were kidnapped from Africa. They were bundled up like cargo, and many of them were shipped to what we today know as the United States of America, and nearly 2 million Africans would die in transit. For the 10.7 million who survived this transatlantic slave trade, life would become a living hell. On reaching America, they were shackled, enslaved, forced to work in sugar fields. Men, women, and children fell to the ground and died on the plantation fields. Slaves were whipped, beaten, burnt, mutilated, raped. So does America have a racist history? Yes, it does. Fast forward a few years, a civil war and secession. US President Abraham Lincoln freed all slaves. The date was the 1st of January, 1863. The decree read, "All persons held as slaves are and henceforth shall be free." 2 years later, on June 19, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger told the slaves of Galveston, Texas, that they were officially free. The day is now known as Juneteenth. The National Museum of African American History and Culture calls it America's Second Independence Day. The United States celebrates Juneteenth every year. But what exactly do they celebrate? There is racism in policing. Black people make up 13% of America's population, but they account for 28% of those killed by police in 2020. There is racism in the criminal justice system. 1 in every 10 black men in his 30s is in jail on any given day. Youth of color make 2/3 of the youth detained. There's still housing discrimination. There is still banking discrimination. Blacks and Hispanics face extra challenges in getting home loans. In 2015, 27.4% of black applicants and 19.2% of Hispanic applicants were denied mortgages. There is still educational discrimination. Nearly 72.4% of black students attend a high poverty school. In comparison, it's 31.3% for whites. Then there's workplace discrimination. A black graduate is more likely to be unemployed. But there are certain jobs where people of color are overrepresented. The lowest paying ones, like food servers, porters, barbers, tailors, dry cleaning workers, concierges, chauffeurs, agricultural workers. In 2018, an average black worker earned just 62% of an average white worker. There is also wealth inequality. African Americans own just 1/10 the wealth of white Americans. There is health disparity. In 2017, 10.6% of African Americans were uninsured. Why do 11 in every 1,000 babies born to black Americans die when the national average is 5.8? And then there are hate crimes. Anti-black bias was behind 27% of the hate crimes in 2019. Some of these crimes are committed by white men in uniform. Let's look at some recent incidents. You're all familiar with these words, the last words of George Floyd. He choked to death after a white police officer knelt on his neck. What was Floyd's fault? He was suspected to have used a counterfeit $20 bill. $20. In March this year, 42-year-old Andrew Brown was shot during an attempted arrest. What was his fault? No one knows. In 2020, 41-year-old Daniel Prude died in New York. He was specially abled. He had no arms on him. But the cops detained him with spithood. He died of asphyxia because of physical restraint. What was his fault? He was running naked through the streets in a light snow. In 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot by a white police officer. 12 bullets were fired. Brown lay dead on the streets of St. Louis for 4 hours. No one knows what happened. The cop was never charged. Brown's death gave birth to the Black Lives Matter movement. As we speak, police in the US is 3 times more likely to fatally shoot a black man. If this is not racism, what is? America has failed to practice equality at home, but it is preaching to the world. Now we come to the question, why is America so racist? Number 1, it has legacy. And number 2, the legacy has now become political. There are 2 major parties of America, the Democrats and the Republicans. African Americans mostly vote for the Democrats, the whites for the Republicans. Barack Obama was the first black man in the White House. His election was seen by many as a national atonement for the sin of slavery. But race also became one of Obama's biggest failures. Under his administration, the percentage of Americans who believed racism was on the rise doubled. Incidents of racism rose too. It was under the Trump administration, not the Obama administration, that lynching was finally declared a federal crime. But that doesn't clear Trump of anything. He played the white supremacy card, whipped up nationalism, made Proud Boys prouder, and sent troops to fight the Black Lives Matter movement. Joe Biden promised to heal the nation, but few months in office, and he says America is not even racist. Can you solve a problem without acknowledging it? I started by showing you some headlines. I'll end by showing you some more. Cases of mental health are rising in the US because of racism against Asian Americans. Minority children in America are lagging behind even in full-time classroom learning. The pandemic has affected more black Americans compared to their white counterparts. Domestic extremism has become mainstream and could threaten American life for 20 years. Half of all US minority-owned small businesses could not afford rent in April. The United States of America is among the 10 worst countries for racial equality, and yet the US thinks it has the moral high ground to school others on minority affairs. It has none. And with that, I rest my case.